Hey everybody, welcome to another CS0 Intro to Java Programming video. In this video, we're going to talk about selection and deselection events. As I've said in a previous video, item listener has the ability to tell us whether an item is selected, what the source of the event was, and what type of event it was. You can check and see if it was a selected event or deselected event, and you can check a lot of things on what kind of event it is, but we're just going to talk about whether or not it's a selected or deselected event in this video, because those are only ones that are really pertinent to the project you're gearing up for. I want to run this so you can see what it looks like. And here's what I have. I've got two checkboxes and then a string that says empty. I check one and it says box or 1 right here, and total cost $2.99. I check box 2 and it says 2, total cost $5.98. I uncheck this, it says 1, total cost $2.99. I uncheck this, it says 0, total cost $0.00. So what's happening here is I've got two check boxes, and it's going to count up how many boxes are currently checked, and then it's going to output a price based on $1.99 per check. Well, how does this relate to what we're going to do? Well, you're going to do a project that is a pizza order form, and the pizza order form is going to have things like checkboxes for toppings, and you can check X number of toppings, and each topping is going to have a price. So maybe you had sausage, pepperoni, and mushrooms. That's 3 toppings, and let's say at your pizza restaurant, toppings are $1 a piece. That would be 3 checks at $1 a piece for a total of $3. Well, this is going to kind of simulate that process there. So using these checkbox, counting up how many are currently checked, and then figuring out the total price per item that's checked. The class is called Deselecting. You should probably open this because you have those lecture files. It extends JFrame, implements item listener. I have 2 checkboxes. I've got a label for output, and I've got an int for total checks. Total checks is going to count the number of those checkboxes that are currently selected. I've got a main method, and in the main method, I'm doing all the stuff that I do in the main. I'm instantiating the frame, I'm setting the size, setting the layout, creating the GUI, and setting visible to true. Let's look at create GUI really quickly. It's not very complex. I'm not decomposing it this time because there's so few things. I'm doing the setting default close operation, getting the content pane. I'm creating my 2 checkboxes, creating my output. I'm adding those things to the frame, and I'm adding the item listener to those 2 checks. So I'm doing all the stuff to this that I would normally do in a GUI with an item listener. Let's take a look at item state change, because that's the interesting part of this program. In item state change, we're going to check a couple of things. We're going to check the source and see if that source is selected. Now here's why. I've got a series of ifs here, and I want to see if one of those checks is checked. I want to see if it's selected, and if it is, I'm then going to set the text to my label with the total number of checks and the total number of checks times $2.99. So what's going to happen here is I don't need to have parentheses, but essentially it's going to do this calculation first, and then it's going to concatenate that to the rest of this string. So if check 1 is the source and check 1 is selected. So what it's doing is it's seeing what the source is and seeing if that particular one was selected. Well, this doesn't seem like it's that important for this, because we don't care which one is selected because it's not telling us that in the output. If I wanted to, I could add something to this, like check 1 was selected, and if I rerun this, you'll see only if check 1 happens that will come up. So if I do that, you'll see it's going to give the, check 1 was selected along with 1 and total cost $2.99. And then that doesn't come up if I select box 2. It doesn't come up if I deselect box 1. If I select box 1, you'll see that thing will come up. So this statement here, if the source is check 1 and check 1 is selected, will allow us to make that thing happen only if check 1 was a source and if it's currently selected. Because if we don't do this is selected thing, let's say I don't do the is selected, but I do just check the get source. It'll do this portion no matter what, no matter if it's selected or not. So it's selected right now, but now it's deselected. But we still have that there. We got a problem. Now it says we've got 2 checks. So it's not decrementing properly. It's not outputting correctly. We need to make sure that when we do this, we are not just checking the source, but we are also seeing if that source is selected. So when we do both of these things at the same time, then it's going to allow this to behave correctly. It'll only increment the total checks, and it'll only output this if check 1 is selected and check 1 is a source. Then it'll do this only if check 2 is selected and if check 2 is a source. If we don't put this in there, it's going to, anytime that that one is a source, it'll do this stuff. All right, so that's how we've got these 2 clauses here. The last if is checking to see if the item event is a deselected event. So let's look at these events again. When I run this, I can check on those boxes or uncheck those boxes. A check event, item event, is when I click on a box. A deselected item event is when I uncheck a box. So you can have an item event selected or an item event deselected. So now I have item event selected or deselected with state change. I've got is selected, and I've got source. Those are 3 different things that I can work into my logic for selecting and deselecting checkboxes. And this can get pretty complex because we've got 3 variables here that can all be true and false. There's several different states that we can check for. In this case, what I want to happen is that if the item event is deselected, and whatever the source is, if it's a deselected event, I want to decrement my total checks, and then I want to set the text again. So if e.getStateChange, state change is going to check what kind of event that was. It's going to, in the item event, it's going to see what kind of change happened. And I can check it against many different constants. Item event deselected, I could do item event selected if I wanted to for something different. But in this case, I don't want to do for the item event selected. I just want to do item event deselected. Okay? So if the item event is deselected, if get source is check 1 or if get source is check 2, both cases I want to decrement total checks and then output the text. Okay? So what's going to happen is if it's not a deselected event, it'll add 1 to the total checks. If it's a deselected event, it'll decrement the total checks so that it'll keep track of how many checks are currently checked at all times. This allows me to build some sort of a program that's going to allow me to select toppings and then total up the number of toppings and multiply that by a cost, and that'll be that topping portion of the cost for pizza. All right, so now we've got a few more tools in our toolbox regarding item state changed. Thanks for watching.